Get her out of my sight now. The voice of Richard Collins thundered through the marble halls of the Grand Collins mansion again. It was not the first time the staff had heard those words. In fact, they had become a sort of anthem in that house, echoing against the cold white walls that were filled with gold frames and silent portraits of people who seemed happier than anyone living there. Richard Collins was a millionaire, a man who had built his empire from scratch, owning one of the biggest tech companies in the city. He had everything most people dreamed of: endless money, luxury cars, vacations on private islands, but none of it could fix the emptiness that grew inside his home ever since his wife passed away 2 years ago. Things had fallen apart. His 6 daughters, once bright and full of laughter, had turned into a storm of grief, anger, and wildness. The oldest, Emily, 16, had stopped smiling. The youngest, Lily, only 4, barely spoke, and the others followed somewhere between sadness and rebellion. The mansion itself had become a battlefield. The girls refused to listen to anyone. They would lock doors, throw food, shout at staff, and laugh when someone cried. The place that once smelled of roses and fresh bread now smelled of chaos. Every single nanny who had entered that mansion left defeated. In just 6 months, 101 nannies had been hired and fired. Some lasted a week, some only a day. One woman even ran away before sunset, leaving her shoes behind on the front steps. They all came in, confident and professional, saying they had dealt with difficult children before, but the Collins girls broke them every time. Richard tried everything. He hired the best psychologists, child experts, and teachers. Nothing worked. The girls simply didn't want anyone near them. They missed their mother, and they didn't trust anyone who tried to replace her. He would sit in his office late at night, staring at the family photo on his desk, his wife smiling, with the girls surrounding her. The memory hurt him so much that he buried himself in work, pretending money could fill the silence. But the silence only grew heavier. He would hear crashes, laughter, screams echoing through the mansion. Sometimes, late at night, one of the girls would cry out in her sleep, and his heart would twist with guilt. He knew he had failed as a father, but he didn't know how to fix it. No one could last long enough to help them. The Collins mansion was beautiful on the outside, but broken within, and everyone in town knew it. No nanny dared to apply anymore until one day a new name appeared on the list, a woman no one had heard of before, a woman named Mabel Johnson. The next morning, the sky was heavy with gray clouds, and a light drizzle touched the long driveway of the Collins mansion, the kind of quiet rain that made everything feel slower, softer, and somehow sadder. The butler stood at the massive front door holding an umbrella, waiting for the next applicant to arrive, though at this point he doubted anyone could survive in that house for more than a day. A black sedan stopped at the gate, and out stepped a woman who looked nothing like the others before her. She was older, maybe in her late 40s, her skin smooth and deep like polished mahogany, her clothes simple, just a neat floral dress and flat shoes, her hair wrapped in a colorful scarf. She carried only a small leather bag and a calm smile as she walked toward the house. The butler frowned slightly. She looked too ordinary compared to the trained professionals who had come before. Some arrived with certificates, others with recommendations from elite families. But this woman didn't seem to care for grand impressions. When she reached the door, he said gently, "Ma'am, before you go in, you should know this. Family has already gone through 101 nannies." She looked up at him with kind eyes and said softly, "Then maybe it's time you tried someone who doesn't quit easy." Inside the mansion, Richard Collins sat behind his desk, tired eyes scanning through another pile of resumes when the butler announced the visitor. He looked up briefly and sighed. "Bring her in." A moment later, Mabel Johnson stepped into his office, and the whole energy of the room shifted. She didn't fidget or act nervous. She just stood there, calm and steady, looking him right in the eyes, as if she wasn't meeting a millionaire but another human being. Richard leaned back and said, "You've heard what happened here, I assume?" Mabel nodded. "I've heard enough, sir. But I also know children don't act out without a reason. He raised a brow. So you think, you can fix them? She smiled. Not fix them, sir, just love them enough to help them heal. He stared at her for a long moment, then finally said, if you can last a week, I'll double your pay. She shook her head slowly. I'm not here for the money, sir. I'm here for the girls. That evening when the 6 daughters met her, they whispered and giggled. The eldest, Emily, smirked and said, you won't last a day. Mabel smiled back gently, maybe not, baby, but let's see, won't we? And for the first time in a long time, someone walked into that house without fear. From the very first morning, Mabel Johnson knew what she was walking into. The moment she stepped into the kitchen, she found juice spilled across the floor, cereal boxes thrown everywhere, and a trail of cookie crumbs leading to giggling voices behind the counter. She smiled quietly and said, looks like somebody had breakfast already. Before she could say more, a bucket tipped over from the top of the door and white flour rained down, covering her completely. The girls burst into laughter, their voices echoing through the mansion like tiny thunderclaps. The youngest, Lily, squealed the loudest, while the oldest, Emily, crossed her arms, waiting for Mabel to shout or storm away like the others had done before. But Mabel didn't even flinch. She looked at herself covered in flour, then grinned and said, well, now I guess we're baking, aren't we? Who's gonna help me make something real out of this mess? The laughter stopped. The girls blinked, confused. They weren't used to anyone laughing along with them still. Mabel walked straight to the kitchen counter, tied an apron around her waist, and started mixing dough, humming softly to herself. It was an old gospel tune, warm and sweet, and it filled the kitchen with something that hadn't been there in a long time. Peace. One by one, curiosity pulled the girls closer. The second oldest, Sophie, peeked from behind the table and asked, what are you singing? Mabel smiled. It's a song about hope, baby, come stir this for me. And to everyone's surprise, Sophie did. The others followed, watching her every move. When the cookies were done, she handed each girl one and said, now every bite you take means one less piece of trouble you'll cause today. The girls laughed again, but this time it wasn't cruel, it was shy and real. That night the mansion was quieter than usual. Mabel sat in the living room sewing a torn doll she'd found on the stairs. She hummed the same song again, and before long the girls started creeping out of their rooms one by one, drawn by that gentle sound. They sat nearby, pretending to read or draw, but really they were watching her. Mabel didn't say a word, she just kept sewing. When Emily finally broke the silence, she said, you don't know anything about us. Mabel looked up, her eyes soft, and said, maybe not yet, but I know what it feels like to lose someone who meant everything. Emily froze. For a second, her lips trembled. She wanted to speak, but couldn't. She just turned away quietly, and for the first time since her mother's death, she didn't yell, she didn't run, she just listened. Days slowly turned into weeks, and the rhythm of the Collins mansion began to change. At first it was hard to notice the difference, but soon the shouting grew quieter, the footsteps lighter, and the laughter started sounding real again. Mabel had brought something into that house that no one else could. Peace mixed with love and patience. Instead of barking orders, she taught through kindness. She didn't just tell the girls what to do, she showed them how to do it together. Every morning she gathered them in the kitchen for breakfast and made sure they cooked something on their own. It didn't matter if the pancakes burned or the eggs cracked wrong. She always said, that's how we learn, baby, one mistake at a time. The girls who once refused to listen to anyone began to enjoy helping her. They started waking up early just to be around her. The smell of freshly baked biscuits filled the house again, and the maids who worked there began to smile more too. Mabel introduced something new every week: family dinner nights. She said no phones, no shouting, just love and stories. They sat around the big table telling funny memories or things they missed about their mom. At first it was awkward, but slowly it became their favorite time of the week. The youngest, Lily, would giggle halfway through every meal, while Emily, the eldest, started helping Mabel set the table before anyone asked her. To the walls that had once echoed with arguments, now carried laughter. When one of the girls had nightmares, Mabel would sit on the edge of the bed humming that same gentle tune and whisper, "You're safe, baby." When another had a bad day, she would wrap her arms around her and say, "It's okay to cry. Sometimes crying is how the heart breathes." Soon the girls stopped hiding their feelings and started talking about them. Mabel didn't replace their mother, but she reminded them that love could still live in that house. Richard Collins watched all of it from a distance. At first, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. His daughters were smiling. Again, their rooms were clean, their laughter filled the halls. One evening, he stood by the staircase, watching as Mabel and the girls danced barefoot. In the living room, the old record player spinning a soft jazz tune, the girls twirled and laughed, their hands in hers. He hadn't seen them that happy since his wife was alive. His throat tightened, and for the first time in years, a tear slipped down his cheek. Months passed, and the Collins mansion no longer felt like a cold museum. It had become a home again. The girls were kinder, calmer, and closer than ever, and Mabel had become the heart of it all. She never asked for praise or reward. She just kept giving her love day after day. One quiet morning, the girls tiptoed into their father's room. Whispering excitedly, they pulled him downstairs, and there, on the kitchen counter, was a cake they had baked themselves, pink frosting, a little messy but beautiful. The words written on top made Richard stop in his tracks. "Congratulations, Daddy, 6 months with Mabel." He laughed out loud, a sound that felt brand new to him. 6 months, that's longer than all the others combined, he said. Emily smiled proudly. "That's because she's not just a nanny, Dad, she's family." For a moment he couldn't speak. He just looked at his daughters and then at Mabel, who stood in the corner wiping her hands on her apron with that same calm smile. A week later, Richard decided to do something special. He gathered the staff and neighbors for a small celebration in Mabel's honor. There were flowers, music, and laughter. When it came time for him to speak, he stood up, his voice trembling a little. He said, "In 6 months, this woman did what 101 others couldn't. She brought peace back to my home. She gave my daughters their smiles, and she gave me back my family." Everyone clapped, but Mabel shook her head with tears in her eyes and said, "I didn't do anything special, sir. I just loved them like they were mine." From that day forward, Mabel stayed not as an employee, but as part of the family. The Collins daughters grew into strong, kind women, each one carrying a piece of Mabel's love inside them. Whenever people asked what changed their lives, they all said the same thing. It wasn't money or fancy things. It was Mabel Johnson, the woman who did the impossible. Love, patience, and understanding can heal wounds that money never will. Sometimes the richest people are those who carry kindness in their hearts. Narrator voice calm and warm. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching stories like this one every week. Your support helps us bring more hope to more hearts. Stay kind, stay inspired, and remember, sometimes love really can do the impossible. Fade out with gentle music and family photo of Mabel and the girls.